My name is Paul Redwick. I work for CED. Somehow I've gotten roped into being the Bluebeam guy. Here we are again. I've been giving some trainings over the last year. If you've been to those, great. I may just reiterate some of the stuff I've said then, but yeah, hopefully this is an introduction to Bluebeam. I think it's a really great software, a hybrid between MicroStation and Adobe Acrobat. It's more powerful than Adobe. It's not as powerful as CAD, but you can do a lot of cool things with it. So this is going to be more of an introduction today. And I wish I had hours and hours because I feel like there's a lot I could show you guys, but we're just going to be focusing on plan reviews today. I understand inspectors and techs are going to be doing more plan reviews. So we're going to jump into that. When I was making this, I was like, oh my gosh, it's Valentine's Day. I got to put a little heart on here. There you go. Our Seneca had talked about possibly having another presentation in a couple of weeks or a month on more tips and stuff I think you guys could use for during construction. How do you keep track of pay notes? How do you measurable quantities? Could you do better ways to make you guys better at your job? I might do another one of those depending on how this goes. And if you still want me after that. First question, why do we pay money for Bluebeam? Because we had Acrobat. Wasn't that good enough? The three main benefits I see of Bluebeam over Acrobat are speed. It's much better at large documents. It's basically built for the engineer and construction fields. And having hundreds of page documents, it can use it pretty quickly. It's much faster for people to write in. There's a lot of shortcut keys. It's a lot more efficient to use. You can use recent tools. You draw something in and then you can redraw it in really quickly. You can make a lot more custom things, much faster to do that. And then you can copy markups. I can send them to someone else and they can import them into their drawing. There's a lot of efficiency pieces. Speaking of which, in markups in general, you can do a lot more markups in Bluebeam than you can in Acrobat. Here's an example of some things that you can do. You can do like this hatching in the back, like concrete hatching. You can do this call out with a circle bubble, which I don't think you can do that in Acrobat. You can do different colors and different fills in the background. I have these custom lines here with the gas label on them. I have the saw cut line. I have a measurement bar here as well. And then I have this polyline that has a curve built into it. Measurement tools, super handy. Do think you can do that in Acrobat, but it's way better to do in Bluebeam. Yeah, a lot of cool tools for redlining. And then a huge change is the workflow. We now can use these things called Bluebeam sessions, taking a PDF, putting it up in the cloud, and then we can have dozens of people working on it and reviewing markup or reviewing plan sets all at the same time. That's an important thing that we're going to talk about today is what are Bluebeam sessions? How do you get into them? And what should you know about them? Because when we talk about plan reviews, that is a big part of what we're going to be talking about. All right. So general outline for today, I'm going to show you the general layout. When you open it up, it looks different than Acrobat. How do you get started? Markups. What do I know about them? What can I teach you guys a little bit about how to make good markups? Measuring tools. I'll go into that a little bit, but that might be more for the next sessions. And then hopefully have a few minutes for tips and tricks and Q&A at the end. First of all, general layout. I like to just start with the menu bar. This menu bar, you're all used to file, edit, view, and this is just like every program has the exact same thing. The thing that I would say about Bluebeam with this is that you can get to pretty much everything in Bluebeam through these top bars. And you see all this other stuff on the side. You see these tools at the top. There's things on the side here. There's all this stuff on so much stuff. All that stuff is really just a shortcut to get to what is also available on the top bar. If you don't know where to go, starting at the top is a good place. And especially this toolbar in particular. There's this markups toolbar. This is honestly probably has most of everything that you might want to use. For example, I'm going to start with just doing a simple call out. This is probably going to be your friend here. Call this guest call out. Really is as simple as that. The next thing I was hoping to talk to you about was quick properties bar. So if you click on basically anything, for example, our test call out, this extra little bar pops up at the top. In that's what's called a quick properties bar. And that changes based on what you click on. If I click on this, there's many different kinds of properties. That call out has different kinds of properties. This text box has different kinds of properties. A measurement has different properties. So it's going to change based on what's up there. But you can change so much of your item, in this case, a call out, just by clicking on that. I can change the line type to green if I want. I could change it to a different dash if I were to see there, but there it is. I can make a border around it. I can make that a thicker border if I want it. I can change the arrow type on here. Now that's a little dot on the end. I can add in fill if I want. I can make that fill have transparency. I can choose the shape to a circle if I want to do that. Change text, change the size of the text. You can do so much stuff. Just this one little bar at the top. You could even change how much spacing you have around these items. I just made something that's illegible, but you get a lot of power in that bar. Honestly, with the markup bar combined with the quick properties, if you just want to be a super novice, right there, you can do pretty much everything you need to do for your job. Everything else I'm going to tell you is just how to do that in a better way. The next thing that I would say we should talk about are the tabs, which are these tabs on the side of your screen here. Now this should look really similar to Acrobat. It is very similar layout. There's recent documents that you've been in, thumbnails, these are all your different pages, bookmarks. We haven't done any of those yet, but those can be really helpful. Layers, another really powerful thing, but we're not going to get into that today. The tool chest I will come back to because this is a much better way, in my opinion, to do markups using your tool chest than just using this menu bar at the top. Search, pretty obvious. Properties. So I showed you the quick properties, the actual properties. There's actually even more properties that you can adjust. So just another way to do a lot of the same stuff, but a few more options. Measurements. We'll get into that today a little bit, but that's what it sounds like, doing measurement, quantity takeoffs and measuring areas and lengths. And then this little blue house is going to be studio sessions, which I should log myself out so you guys can see what it looks like when you don't have an account. But we'll get into that today as well. That's going to be where we are reviewing our plans. Someone takes a PDF, they upload it into the cloud, and everyone can work on it together. You're going to need to go into your studio account, sign into a plan, a document. You probably have a link from someone, and then that will send you to a plan set that you can then work on. Let's talk a little bit more about markups. I mentioned the tool chest. The tool chest is really going to be your friend. You can make what are called tool sets in your tool chest. You can see I have a lot of different ones in here. The tool chest is made up of different tool sets. You click on that little arrow, it shows you all the ones you have loaded. You can turn them on or off, uncheck them if you want. I'm sure in your case, there's a lot of them just built in. And what you should have built in are my tools and recent tools. And then everything else is probably going to be the ones that are built in to Bluebeam. I usually like to start with just like the pen. I like to set in the my tools. I like to set those, the first three as pen, because I use those so much. You can also just get to them under tools, markup, pen. You can see right there. So pen is going to be just drawing lines. Like I was showing you before, you can change the color to blue, the red to green. This pen example, you can see actually it's a little bit thicker. Basically, someone took a pen, they made it thicker, and then they added in some transparency, that little percentage, 50%, and they made it green. You can do all that stuff with your pen. And I'll get into how we're going to do our markups, but that's going to be helpful when we do our markups. Callouts, talked about them a little bit already. With pen and callout, you've got 90% of probably what you're going to be using. Like I was mentioning before, you can do shapes. You can make them like a little triangle. We often do when we have a change to a track document. You can do that right up there with the different shape. Okay, these are the ones actually, before I do the polylines and polygon, I'll jump to the text. Again, under markups, text box, just pretty self-explanatory. You can type in whatever you want. You can have the border on or off, and a little bit counterintuitive, but to turn the border off on something, these two right here are your border. You have a line weight for my border. Now I change it to dash line. You want to change your line weight to 0, and that's how you turn off your border. I can make it 0, or I can make it 3 if I wanted to make it even bigger, depending on what you want to do. You can add a fill to it, the same as with the call out. You could change the transparency in your fill, change the shape, really similar. Or you could even add a leader. Now it basically is a call out. So there's a lot of overlay between the different types of things. I mean, this one can have a leader as well. I could even go in here, delete my leader, and now it's basically a text box. These two things are sort of interchangeable a little bit. Okay, so let's talk about polylines and polygons. A little bit more advanced, but I don't know. I think they're super super powerful tools. Go to my tools, go to my markup. Now, I would just make sure you know there are such a thing as a line, and then there's something different called a polyline. The line is a little bit simpler. You can't have multiple nodes or vertices in your line, whereas in your polyline, you can have multiple nodes. It might not seem like that big of a deal, but there's a couple other cool features with these. You can add in near points if you want. So if you want to edit it on the fly, you can do that. You can also add in an arc and mess around with that. So this is going to come in handy when we do our measuring tools. If you have like a curve ramp, we can measure around the curve or these. Same concept. But if you want to draw on a curve, want to draw on multiple nodes, you can do that very easily. Same thing goes for the polygon. There's a rectangle, there's an ellipse. Those are like I'm going to call them like the dumb shapes. And the polygon is like the smart shape. If I draw on a rectangle, I can right click on it. I cannot add in, there's no place to add curves in here. There's no place to add points in here. However, if I come in here and I polygon, draw pretty much the exact same shape. Sorry, the wrong one there. Polygon. Now I can right click, add points, stretch it. I can add in those arcs as well, or right click and delete points also. So a lot of stuff you can do with that. You can see this little heart that I made from the first page. I actually made this using a polygon. You can draw some pretty cool shapes with it. I mentioned briefly the My Tools. I should probably talk about this a little bit more. I'll talk about this in the tips and tricks a little bit more, but I don't know if you can see there's a little number sitting like right next to each My Tool that actually corresponds to the number on your keyboard. I've actually set these to be shortcuts. So if I hit the number 1 on my keyboard, it's going to be a red pen. If I hit the number 2 on the keyboard, it's a blue pen. Same with the 3. If I hit this number instead of 8, it brings up that Roan text. I've set up shortcuts for things that I use a lot. I don't know if you noticed, but as I've been doing that, the recent tools has been populating as I've been moving along. So for example, if I hit this, draw an ellipse, it showed up right here in my recent. So it's pretty handy if you're drawing in stuff. Now we can easily grab it again. One thing I also want to show you, if you do want to ever edit these My Tools, it's pretty easy. And the way you do it is you can just drag stuff around to the My Tool, or this tool that I just made, it showed up my recent tools. I can just take this and drag it into my tools. And now that's number 8. If I hit 8, now it makes a circle. I can make a tool, add it to my tools really easily. If you have a shape that you already see, you want to add a toolbox, and you can just right click on it. On the very bottom, add to tool chest. I can add it that way as well. Now that got added in as last thing I want to show you about markups. This is like a little legend that of how to do markups. This is basically how we in CED send notes to our drafters. If I write something in red, that means that I want the drafter to write that. I'm going to go to that little plan sheet a couple sheets later. If I want my drafter to write something, I want them to write Roan Street right here. If I write Roan Street, they're going to type exactly Roan Street like that. I'll bring over my little legends. So I have it right here. Blue are notes to the drafter. If I wanted to tell my drafter, write in Roan Street. That's how I would tell them to do it. Blue is not, they're not going to actually physically write that in. They're going to say it's a note to them. If I had made this comment in red, most drafters are going to be like, what, did you really mean that? Doesn't make sense. But I've written this in red. Theoretically, they should be putting in an arrow with write in Roan Street on there. Just be careful what colors you put, because the drafters are there to have a format they're supposed to follow. And then green is delete. If I tell them I don't want to have this 14, I want to take out these stationing right here, they should delete those. And then the last one I would mention is this one right here, which is notes to the designer. That's like notes to the engineer. Like, are you sure this manhole is there? The main reason to do it is because you guys put your comments in, structures, SSL, traffic, everyone puts their comments into this document. If you guys have some different color scheme, I have to convert them before they go to the drafter. If you just make them all the right color, then we can delete or change as needed, but if it's like mostly correct, it just really saves us along. Yeah, that's what I'm hoping. If you guys are willing to do that, that would really help us out. Measuring tools. So the first thing I would say about measuring tools they are completely and utterly dependent on the scale being correct of your drawing. If your scale is wrong, Doesn't matter how beautiful your measuring tools are. I would just double, triple check, make sure that it's right. We are supposed to upload them to Bluebeam with the scales set. Now that may or may not happen. And I'll get into that a little bit when we do the Bluebeam session example. Have a good example of this is exactly how you should hope it is. And then like a bad example of like what you should expect for the time being. And then you can be like, you didn't do it right. But yeah, there's a couple different ways to set the scale of a drawing. The one I often go to is this one right down here in the bottom, right? And you can see this one has actually already been set. Actually, I want to set on this scale as well. I'm going to go to a drawing that there's no scale set right. This is theoretically, you should be going to a Bluebeam session. The scale should already be set up correctly. But if the scale is not set, you just click on this drawing right here, and this little pop-up is going to show up. It's first going to ask you which pages do you want the scale to be set up. So you can actually you set the whole document up with one go. Most of our plans have some pages with some scale and some pages with a different scale. You probably don't want to do that, but you can set up multiple pages at a time. There's a lot of preset ones in here. Almost all of ours are either like 1 inch equals 10 or 1 inch equals 20. Those are the two that you should probably be setting it to. You can come in and set it to a custom scale, like 1 inch equals 20, and you shouldn't really have to be doing that, but technically you could. There's also something else called calibration. I'm not going to even teach you that today. It's a way you can measure something on the screen, but that's more of an advanced thing. We can get into that another day, but generally speaking, it should be 1 inch equals 10 or 1 inch equals 20. This drawing, for example, is 1 inch equals 20. But okay, well, which one is it? I don't know. You can check down here. It says it's 1 inch equals 20. How would I actually go about checking that that's right? If I go back to my tools, measure, go to length, I can just measure that, and I came up with 20 feet. I know that it's 20 feet. I would highly recommend, and by how to say you need to, if you are doing any measurement things on here, measure the scale bar, because it might say something, it might be different. It might have been printed at the wrong scale. Go off of this scale bar. And then if you're like, this doesn't make sense, look at something on the plan that it has a length, like 13 plus 50 to 1400. That scale bar could be wrong, but this should not be wrong. 50 feet, that's correct. This is much more likely to be correct than the scale bar. Scale bar is like a first check. And then if something's not making sense, then check something on the plan that has a known quantity. I just went over length a little bit, but I'll just do it really quickly again. Back to that tools bar at the top, measure length, or you can do a poly length as well. Length is what you would expect. Same thing with your quick properties bar. You can change all sorts of different, didn't really change that very much. You can change it, the colors, you can change the size of the font. You can do all sorts of different stuff. There's a lot of different ways you could make it more beautiful if you wanted to. The poly length command is going to be especially good when we're measuring curves. Something with a curve in it can do multiple points. You can do all sorts of different stuff. I can make this a curve if I want. Same exact thing as the polyline. It's basically the polyline with lengths on it. And you maybe notice that there's like a bunch of different quantities on there. Like this is 6.78, 5.61, 7.76. This is actually like the sum total of those. And let's go back to the properties bar, see if that gives us any information. Part of the properties bar is the color of this, the line type, all sorts of different cool things you can make it look a certain way. But embedded in here is actually 3 little tabs up here, which actually are a little bit more important than just the color. One of them is called show segment values. So that is going to turn on all those little segment values. It's just going to show you the total length of this. The other one is units. I would definitely make sure you have the units set to feet. I know it likes to default to feet and inches. I'm not really a big fan of that feet and inches line. It's not really how we operate. And then the third one is a bunch of different labeling that you can have built in. So I can actually just like turn off all the labeling by clicking that. I can have the length on or off. This one doesn't have a label built in, but I could have this labeled as curved or something if I really wanted to make it even more beautiful. Anyways, those 3 little boxes up there are ways to do even more than just color coordinating. So we're going for polyline, poly length, and length. Next, I want to do area. And area is what you'd expect. Come in here, make my area. I can move these little bins around. I can come in here, add points in. I could add curves in if I wanted to do something around an arc. can mess around with a lot of things. You'll notice there's a lot of different things being shown on this area right here. This is the same thing I was just telling you about before. If you turn on all these labels, you can have the captions on or off. I can turn the length on. I don't know if there's really a depth. There is a width and a height to these. You can really have a lot of information being shown here if you want. If I come in here and do my measurement, you can just double click on it and just type in 10. And you have to hit the units or it won't work. Like you have to hit type in feet or a little tilde thing for feet. Yeah, you can make it exactly as you want. You can spend a lot of time trying to get it exactly right, or you can just type it in. But it's pretty smart. Like if you type in 25 inches, it knows that that's 2.08 feet. There's a couple of little tricks you can do. And again, back to your units, we could set this in inches if you wanted, or whatever you would want. The last thing I want to show you is something called count. This is a way to add up stuff. Basically what it sounds like. Under here, under your tools, measure, count, I can basically just add check boxes, count up stuff as much as I want, but they're all linked together. These 7 things are all linked together. I can come in here, I can right click on one and I can resume count. I can keep counting. I can split these up. I can reset the counting positions. There's a bunch of things you can do with the counting. Yeah, I'm just showing you guys that there is some stuff here. There's a lot more to the counting that you can do. You can do different layers and stuff with it. And you can even do a legend that displays on your drawing, but I'll save that for the next session. One other thing I wanted to show you about was why I didn't have the markups toolbar here. It feels like that's important. The markup list is, and actually most people have it down at the bottom here. I really like it on the right, so I'm gonna just go with that, like how it was in Adobe. But the markup list is a super, super handy feature in Bluebeam. This exists in Acrobat, but it's just so much more powerful in Adobe. You can search for stuff really easily. I want to search in here for anything that says length, and I can just jump between stuff in the drawing. Another thing I can type in here and count. It's just basically really fast way to find stuff. If I want to search for something by color, I can sort by color. If I'm looking for a particular note, I can do that. If I want to highlight all the notes on a page, I could come in here and shift, highlight everything on the page. You can basically click on something and it tells you exactly what it is, all the information about it. Really, really powerful. One more quick thing on the measuring before we go on. So say, for example, I wanted to measure this ADA ramp. I would just come in here, go to my tools, measure, area. I think I have a scale set for this one, right? And this is not going to be as perfectly accurate as CAD, but it's pretty close. I'm actually snapping to those points that are built in. It's pretty good. How do I have that in here? I can right click, invert the arc. I can tweak this a little bit. I guess I probably should have included my gutter pane in here. Didn't do that right. But now you can come in here, you can edit stuff on the fly, add another point. It's a great way to check what's on the plans because we make mistakes as designers, and I'm sure this is going to be something that you can use. Another thing that you could do, say you are trying to figure out how far, I know this existing manhole is here. I'm trying to figure out exactly where this curve is. How do I figure that out? I got to ask the engineer, or you can just say, hey, I'm going to measure from the middle of my manhole, come in here 12.77 feet and use that information and figure it out in the field. Gives you a lot more power at your fingertips to figure stuff out in the field. Sessions, again, Bluebeam sessions are putting a PDF in the cloud. This is what you guys are going to be using. And generally speaking, there's a lot of good things about them. There are some things that are not good about them. For whatever reason, these sessions, PDFs do not have as much functionality. There's a few things that you can do when they're not in a session that you can't do when they are. I don't exactly know why. It is something to do with the technology. So it's limited, but overall they're good. You got one document is great, especially for us. Instead of someone sending us like 8 different plan sets and you have to combine all the files, like it's just way better to do it this way. You can have multiple people in the same plan set at the same time. A lot of people like seeing other people's comments. So that's been a real good benefit. You can, maybe it triggered you to think of something you wouldn't have thought of otherwise. There is some collaborative things you can do. Like you can chat with someone and like can send someone a little link to a plan comment. There's stuff like that. I don't know how much we actually use that, but it sounds cool. And then even if you don't have a Bluebeam license, anyone can get into a Bluebeam session and make simple markups. That's something, I don't know who pays for Bluebeam, but if people are just doing simple markups, and they're only getting into sessions, that's something that could technically be done for free. The bad of them, as I said, there's some limited functionality. You can't delete other people's comments, which maybe that is a good thing. I don't know, but I think it's a bad thing. Page labels, like there's some stuff that you have to set up beforehand. And I'll show you guys this next, like how does a good Bluebeam session look like and what is a bad one? Page labels and bookmarks and stuff like that. Like you have to either set up before it goes in the session or set it up after. And then the measurement tools, again, if someone doesn't set the scale correctly, when you go and try to set it up, the scale in a session, it doesn't come in for everyone. It just comes in for you. But there's just some weird little things about it. How to join a session. Someone's going to give you either like an invitation link, probably eBuilder, or maybe email. There's also a way you can just, if you just know the session ID, and here's the session ID right here. I give a couple examples. 9-digit code. If you have this 9-digit code, you should be able to jump into someone's session. I'm going to go in here and show you guys what a session is and how to jump in. You have to have a Bluebeam Studio account. If you guys haven't set one of these up yet, you should all set one up. Pretty sure it's free. You can see I have 2 sessions in here. These are the same ones I have right over here. I set up a bad Bluebeam session, which I'll go into first, and then a good Bluebeam session. And that is the number. You guys shouldn't really ever be making Bluebeam sessions. I imagine you're just going to be going into someone else's. I'm mostly just so you just joining a session. The 2 ways to join a session are someone's going to give you an email link, and it will look like a copy session invitation. Here we go. So it will look like this. You've been invited by Paul Rudwick to join a Bluebeam session. Here's a session ID and a link. You literally just should be able to just click on this link and it should take you into the session, assuming you log into your account. Another way is, like I was saying, you can, if you have the ID, click on this little plus sign and go to join, type in the session, and it will show up. There should be a link in eBuilder. You just click on it. Within the Bluebeam session, a couple things you might want to take note of are your status. What am I doing? I'm finished. I'm waiting. I'm reviewing. I would probably set this to whatever. Oh, Melissa Curtis is in. Okay, so this is an example of a bad session. When I made this, I didn't set it up so anyone can get in. She requests you to get in. So I'm going to hit OK. And I'm actually going to go in here and change my settings and set it to not restrict. Now anyone should be able to jump in. You can see Melissa is not in here, but she's now basically requested to jump in, which is pretty cool. We can both be working here at the same time if we want to. Another thing that you should notice is this is a list of documents. You might open up your session and be like, I don't see any plans. You have to double click on the document. I'm actually already in the document here, but there might be like 4 or 5 documents in a session, like probably an estimate, maybe some specs, maybe a plan sheet. You have to double click on that first. And then the way that it's a Bluebeam session and you see this little TV thing right here, that tells you that's a Bluebeam session. So this happens a lot where people are like, Paul, is there something wrong with the session? And I go like, is there a TV there? Like, no. I'm like, okay, then it's not a session. Another thing I should have mentioned, there's 2 things in Bluebeam Studio. There's what's called Bluebeam projects and Bluebeam sessions. And we mostly use Bluebeam sessions. So just make sure you're clicking on a little TV right there. What are the other things I want to show? Okay, the things that are bad about this. So this doesn't have the things set up that I would hope they would. And the things that I would hope they would be set up are the bookmark. I guess these are set up. These are the ones auto-generated from CAD. These aren't that bad, I guess. It has a page number on it. The other thing that I really like to have are, you see these little, it says 1 right there. That's called a page label. That should correspond to this number right here. Those are not set up correctly. And you can say it says scale not set on all of these. I'll show you what happens with the problem with scale and sessions if they're not set up prior to. So this little thing right here, this document is in a session and has an embedded. That basically means if I set the scale to this and then Melissa goes into the document, she has to set the scale for it too. It only works per user. So she might draw stuff on there and scale 1:10, and I might draw stuff in there 1:20, and then our scales aren't even going to be the same. Maybe she's right and I'm wrong. We want it to all be consistent. So you can only be in one session at a time. Can't imagine it's going to be a big problem, but just one thing to know. If you want to get into a new session, you have to leave an old session. See right here, I put the due dates in. That's one thing that we should be doing. Putting the due date in the session itself, session name. Everyone knows when it's due. This is a little checklist that they're supposed to put on the plan set before. Do they have the page labels? Where I was looking at those page labels, see this has 1, 1B, 1C, 2A1. That lines up with this. So that's correct. Bookmarks should look more like this. The number and then the street plan, all that stuff on there. And then what was the last thing on the checklist? Scale. So you can see right there, 1 inch equals 2,000. That's just for this little area. All of them are 1 inch equals 20, 1 inch equals 20. So scale's already been set on all these. So that's what you want. The fourth thing that you should look for is this little setup piece. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but there's this thing in here called responsible party and action required. These are 2 little notes in here for when you're doing comments in a plan review. And the bad set, they did not have these in here. These are things that you guys should be filling out, and probably for almost all of the responsible party is going to be the designer. The responsible party is the designer. Action required, yes, comment, or no, FYI only. That's something that you guys should be filling out with all your comments. So you put that in there and then say who it's for. CED, for traffic, structures, structural, consultant, project manager. If you don't know, then just put CED designer, say, because we're like the managers of the plan sets. And so honestly, you could just put CED designer for everything. If you don't know, we'll figure it out. If you do know, if it's a traffic related question or a structure related question, then that would be helpful. Or if the whole project's consultant, then it could be a consultant thing. The more you fill it out, the better. But if you don't, then it's okay. So the good news is you got like a 30% plan review, a 60, a 90. It's really important, and you mentioned it a couple times. That's when you go knock on the designer's desk and be like, hey, what the heck? I didn't see my comment address yet. So I think my meeting was supposed to end in like a minute or two. I'm going to do a couple minutes of tips and tricks, and then we can open it up for Q&A. Does that sound good for everyone? First tips and tricks I'm going to do, I'm going to basically make my tips and tricks slide for you on the fly here. A trick is to make a new plan set or plan sheet. I can click this little button right here, insert a blank page. But instead of doing that, I'm going to delete the page that I just made. And I'm going to right click on this one here and copy page. This copy paging and just pasting is a really cool trick that I think everyone should use. I can copy pages, make a new document here. I can paste that same page into a new document. If you're trying to paste, there it is. If you're trying to like export a page out, this is, in my opinion, one of the easiest ways to do that. It's just like make a new document and then paste the page you wanted into it. That's a pretty cool trick. So next trick I'm going to show you is I'm going to come in here and I want to delete all of the comments except for my border. And I made this border as a group, which means I like merged multiple comments together. I'm going to highlight everything. I'm going to hold shift, click on the border, click on my title, and hit delete. Everything's gone except for those things. I'll just what did I do with that group thing? What does that even mean? You right click on something, you can merge multiple things together. An example of when you might want to do this, let me, on my toolbar here, I have these little slope arrows in here. This is actually 2 different things that are connected together. I drew in a arrow and I drew in a slope. This is a pretty cool trick that you can do if you want to do slope arrows or whatever. Highlight both of them, right click, and go to group. And there are some pretty powerful things you can do with this, like that little legend that I made. That is a grouped thing. You still can edit text. Occasionally when you make it bigger or smaller, it can like put stuff on the next line. So it can be slightly annoying. You see the percentage we're done with the next line. So it can be a little tedious. I would go in here, have to ungroup it, fix the text, go back and then group it again. There's like, sometimes a little bit tedious, but generally it's pretty cool. But the cool thing about grouping stuff is a bunch of cool things. One, you can change the size of everything all at once. If this is ungrouped, if I want to like make this bigger, I'm like, I got to make this bigger. And then I got to make this bigger. And I go in here and change the text, whatever it is, 50, something like 48, way bigger. And then I got to change it. It's like tedious with anything. Or if I just Control Z a couple times, if it's all grouped together, you can just make the whole thing bigger at once, even if they're like vectorized things. It's like a picture. I can make it bigger or small. Same thing with this legend. I mean, this legend is like multiple things together. If I wanted to like change the text size of all these, it's like a pain in the butt to like change 8 different things. If I group it, now I can scale it up, and you can see it makes the text like a super weird font size, like 30.31, but it just basically like scales everything up together. It's pretty cool. Another really cool thing about grouping is that you can right click. I can add this whole group to my toolbar. I cannot, if it was like set up separately, like I can't add in 7 different things as a tool. It won't work. But if they're all grouped together, then you can add it into Studio. I use grouping a ton. It is like really powerful. And it allows you to do stuff like group ADA ramps together and make all like little things that you could use over and over again. Or another example would be, here's my inlet. It's like 20 lines or something built all together. Like I just grouped them all together. And now I can just draw it again whenever I want. Okay, the last trick I wanted to show you is a little trick when it comes to typing stuff in. One of the most annoying things to me in Adobe was text, making the text boxes smaller. I don't know if anyone has ever had this problem, but I am always having this problem. It feels like in Bluebeam, not only can you just drag things like Acrobat, but there's this other little thing on here. If you right click on a text box and go to, where is it? Auto size text box. Or you can also do a shortcut Alt Z, but auto size text box will just automatically make your text box the right size. That to me is just like a game changer. Furthermore, if you go up to your settings under File, Preferences, I think it's under, there it is, under Tools Markups, this one right here. This is, I think, defaulted to turn off. Everyone would just turn this thing on. Auto size text box and column markups. If you have this checked, I would have everyone check this. It just automatically does it every time you type something. So I come in here, got my text box, it automatically just makes it the right size. Every once in a while you have to come in and change it, but like 95% of the time it comes in right. I think that's what I got for today, everyone.